Good afternoon. Today I'm going to be reviewing the Traska Seafarer Charcoal Black 5223 version 3. This watch is available from traskawatch.com for €641. The Seafarer is also available in stone grey, steel blue and bleached orange. Of the colour options, I think this charcoal black version is the best looking. Traska are a well-established microbrand. They've been making watches since 2018 and they're based in Florida in America. So what's different with the V3? Well, this V3 features three notable upgrades to the V1 and V2. It now has 0.3mm of BGW9 superluminova applied to the printed indices. It also has a quick adjust clasp on the bracelet, and it also has a screw down crown for the second crown, which rotates the internal bezel. So the V1 and the V2 did not have a screw down crown for the internal bezel. This V3 does. So it's good to see a microbrand constantly refine and improve their pieces, and Traska deserve credit for this. So firstly, let's look at the leather travel case that the watch comes in, and then I'll talk you through the specifications of the piece. The watch comes in a black leather travel case, and this is the outer sleeve. One removes. There's also a lid to the box. So one removes the lid, which is a very snug fit. And as you can see, inside we have the black leather travel case. It's embossed on the flap with the Traska emblem. Good stitching throughout and very aesthetically pleasing. Traska deserve credit for using a leather travel case rather than the default option of a plastic or cardboard watch box. The interior is fully upholstered with an aesthetically pleasing grey velour fabric to a good standard. And inside we also have this foam piece, which is also grey velour fabric coated, and this goes in between the bracelet clasp and also the case back to prevent the bracelet and clasp rubbing against the case back and scuffing and scratching it. So good attention to detail, and I like it. Nice stainless steel popper. So one also gets this owner's instruction manual, which is a leaflet, and inside it details the operation of the movement use, which is the Miyota caliber 9039, and on the back it details the terms and conditions of the warranty and service. Clear, concise diagram and also clear instructions. So with regards to the dimensions, we have a 38.5mm case diameter, we have a lug-to-lug measurement of 46mm, a thickness of 11.3mm and a lug width of 20mm. The oyster style bracelet tapers from 20mm at the lugs down to 16mm at the two button push clasp, and as you can see it's engraved with a Traska emblem to a high standard with high definition engraving. Beautiful luster to the 316L grade stainless steel, and also nice mirror polished bevel to the clasp. No sharp edges, no burrs, and the corners are well deburred. It doesn't have sharp corners. The mirror polishing to the flanks is high quality, as you can see. Absolutely gorgeous finishing to it. Nice heavy gauge to the 316L grade stainless steel. Now, this watch is only 140 grams and it has 150 meters of water resistance. Normally I would be critical of a dive piece having 150 meters of water resistance. Strictly speaking, a dive watch should have 200 meters. But in this case, I'm not going to be critical. Now, why is that? Well, this watch is incredibly thin for a dive piece. It's only 11.3mm thick. And that's thanks to using a very low profile movement, the Miyota caliber 9039, which is a low profile version of the 9015. So by using that very thin movement, they are able to reduce the thickness of this piece to only 11.3. Normally a dive piece would be 13mm, 11.3 is exceptional, bearing in mind it uses a double dome sapphire crystal, which has a boxed top hat profile to it. So 150 meters is acceptable because it is very thin, and the benefit of that is it's very comfortable to wear for long periods of time. There's something to note about this piece, and it's one of my favorite aspects. It's made entirely from hardened 316L grade stainless steel. So this has a hardness rating of 1200 HV. HV stands for hardness Vickers. So to put that into perspective, standard 316L grade stainless steel typically has a hardness rating of 200 HV, 200 hardness Vickers. This watch has a hardness rating of 1200 hardness Vickers. So the bezel, the case back, the bracelet and the clasp are entirely made from hardened 316L grade stainless steel. The benefit of that is This watch is more scratch resistant, 1200 HV versus the standard 200 HV. So it means that the bracelet and clasp are not going to get scuffed and scratched as per normal 316L grade stainless steel. This is very scratch resistant. Again, Traska deserve credit because this is a mid-tier piece costing €641. One doesn't see hardened stainless steel at this price point. It really is excellent. So, double dome sapphire crystal with clear AR coating, as I've detailed, nice boxed top hat profile to it, and I really love the concave profile to the inner rotating bezel. It's just absolutely gorgeous. And we've got the V3 upgrade of 0.3mm of BGW9 on the printed indices. Just absolutely gorgeous handset, correctly proportioned. The minute hand extends all the way to the minute ticks on the chapter ring, and the second hand also is the right length. It extends all the way to the minute ticks on the chapter ring. The internal bezel is very nice. I really like the concave profile to it. It has a nice 3D effect to it when looking at it through the double dome sapphire crystal. I'll show you the case back. Solid 316L grade stainless steel. Concentric CNC lathe tool machining to it. As you can see, the concentric CNC machining gives it a nice refraction of the light. Perfectly flat and smooth. This is incredibly low profile. Just look at the profile. It looks very flat. This is the kind of flat stainless steel caseback one would expect to see with a manual wind piece, not an automatic with a rotor. And again, this is the benefit of using the Miyota caliber 9039, which is very low profile, because one can have a very thin case and also a very low profile caseback. Absolutely gorgeous finishing to it. No sharp edges, no burrs to the milled slots in the caseback. It has the specification and the reference engraved around the circumference. But I absolutely love the brush satin finishing, which is done to a very high standard. It's absolutely flawless. The finishing to the underside to the head of the piece is perfect. No sharp edges, no burrs to the edges. And the tips of the lugs have nice chamfers on them, as you can see. And that means there's no sharp edges to dig into the wrist. So it's a very well finished case and caseback. Now, something I want to give special credit to Traska for, and again, this is exceptional for a mid-tier piece costing €641. The solid milled stainless steel clasp, which is made from hardened steel, has pelage finishing. Just look at the pelage finishing. Absolutely gorgeous. Normally one would see longitudinal brush satin finishing, which is perfectly acceptable, but this is pelage finishing. And pelage finishing is something one sees on movements on high-tier pieces. One doesn't see pelage finishing on bracelet clasps at this price point. Even on a high-tier piece, this would be exceptional. And it's absolutely gorgeous. They've even done pelage finishing on the inside of the right-hand portion. It's just incredible. Now, another notable upgrade of the V3, as I've detailed, is the quick adjust clasp, as you can see, which is very well executed. And it's very robust because, as you can see, there are two flathead screws either side on either of the flanks, and that secures the mechanism so it's not going to come loose. So I'll show you the adjustment. It's got a firm trigger action, so you really have to press in the trigger hard and then you can deploy it. As you can see, it gives a full 10mm of micro adjustment on the fly. Pushing it back in, it has got a nice click to each of the ratcheting clicks. And it feels very solid, as you can see. So I'll just deploy it again. I have to give it a good firm push. It's very heavily spring loaded, fully deployed, as you can see. And then one pushes it in click by click. Nice loud audible clicks. It feels very solid, very sprung loaded. And that's now fully engaged. So it works very well. And you can use your thumb to press the trigger, as you can see. But one has to give it a really firm press. It's very heavily sprung loaded, and that will deploy it. I actually find it easier to do it externally by pressing an index finger against the trigger and then just pull it out like that. And you can push it back in one click by click, like that. Very solid. It's one of the heaviest, in terms of mechanism, the resistance, it's one of the heaviest ratcheting class I've experienced. It doesn't have any play whatsoever. Heavy spring-loaded action, good quality machining to it, and no lateral side-side play in it. It feels very tight, so it really does fit very well inside. Very good mechanism, and Traska deserve credit for it because it's very good at this price point to get a high grade of ratcheting mechanism. Right, so let's test the screw down crown execution. Now, as I've detailed, the V3, this now has a screw down crown. We have two crowns. The top one rotates the internal bezel, which has a mesh formation to it, and the lower crown sets the time. As you can see, it's engraved to high standard with the Traska emblem. Nice mirror polished dome cap to the coin edge finished crowns, and these are also hardened 316L grade stainless steel. No burrs to the coin edge finishing, and they feel very grippy and tactile. So we'll test the lower crown, which operates the time setting first. Absolutely silky smooth. This is sublime screw down crown execution. It feels very light resistance, so it indicates high quality control. Perfect interface between the internal thread of the stainless steel crown and the external thread of the stainless steel crown tube. 150 meters of hermetic seal. So this is the Miyota caliber 9039, which is the low profile version of the 9015, and therefore it doesn't have a date complication. There's no date wheel beneath the dial, and therefore we don't have a phantom date setting position. So there is no first click. It simply has, when you unscrew it, we're now in the manual wind position, so one can feel the tension in the mainspring gradually building up in the caliber 9039 to its maximum 42-hour power reserve. Feels nice and smooth. Absolute pleasure to manually wind it. Pulling it out, it's got a nice fine click. It feels lighter than an NH35A because the 9039 is a premium grade of Miyota caliber. The 9000 series of Miyota calibers are premium. They're equal in quality to an ETA 2824-2 or a Sellita SW200-1. They are high grade of Miyota movement. So very smooth, lighter action than a Seiko NH35A, which you'll be familiar with. So as you can see, the 9039 has hacking. I've now hacked the movement. The second hand has stopped dead. Nice light resistance to it. It feels very smooth and very refined, and I really like the 9000 series of Miyota calibers. The 9015 and the 9039 are personal favourites of mine, and this 9039 is actually my favourite of them all because it is lower profile. So absolutely gorgeous to operate, silky smooth, clockwise and anti-clockwise. The gearing has no friction whatsoever. Nice medium resistance to it. It feels light, very smooth, and no backplay. Clockwise and anti-clockwise, there's an immediate response. When you rotate the crown clockwise and anti-clockwise, there's minimal backplay. Pushing it back in, it's got a nice positive click, and that restarts the movement. You'll see the second hand begins to sweep around the dial once again. So let's test screwing it back down. Instant thread pickup. This is 10 out of 10, silky smooth. So it feels very light. There's no friction whatsoever between the threads. The internal thread and the external thread mesh perfectly. It's Rolex level in terms of quality. I absolutely love it. Light action. The thing I also like about it is the threading is short, so you don't have to screw and unscrew the crown a lot of turns to get it to come out and to screw it back down again. It's got a nice short crown tube threading, and yes, it does have 150 meters of hermetic seal. So as I've detailed, V3 now has a screw down top crown. Previously it didn't. The negative of not having a screw down crown for the internal rotating bezel is sometimes you can accidentally brush against the right hand flank of the piece, and that means that the internal bezel can knock out of position accidentally, so that's a disadvantage. And I'm pleased that Traska have addressed this in the V1 and V2 because it was a main negative. This V3 now has a screw down second crown, and again, absolutely silky smooth. It immediately unscrews, no resistance whatsoever, silky smooth, sublime screw down crown execution. So bidirectional internal rotating bezel, as you can see, as an alternative to an external bezel with a 120 click ratcheting mechanism. It doesn't click, it's smooth. It's got a very light resistance to it, and it feels smooth both clockwise and anti-clockwise. There's no backplay in it. When you rotate the top crown, clockwise or anti-clockwise, the internal bezel immediately rotates. There's no backplay. It doesn't feel sloppy, it feels tight. I'm just going to cycle it through the full 60 minutes just to see how it is. It feels even all the way through the 360 degrees of rotation. I'm just going to check it anti-clockwise for consistency. Smooth. The resistance feels the same both clockwise and anti-clockwise. No backplay in it. And of course, one can set the alignment manually to bang on 60 or 12 o'clock. And you simply push it down and screw it down. Again, instant thread pickup. This has one of the best thread pickups on both the lower crown and the top crown I've experienced on a mid-tier piece. Because sometimes when screwing down a crown, you have to rotate it anti-clockwise and clockwise a few times to find the pickup in the threads, to get the internal thread of the crown to pick up with the thread on the external thread of the crown tube. And it takes a few attempts. And on low tier pieces, often it's difficult to get the crown to screw down. It's difficult to get the threads to mesh. On a high tier piece, it always happens instantly because the machining is done to a higher standard, the quality control is done to a higher standard. It's higher tolerance machining. And of course, that's more expensive. It costs more to produce. This is a mid-tier piece, but we really have high tier level finishing to the threads, and the quality control is 10 out of 10. So both crowns are silky smooth, and Traska deserve credit because this is a new update for the V3 and they have got it correct. The bezel is beautifully finished. Mirror polish chamfered to the edge of it, as you can see, and that contrasts with the brushed satin finish to the top edge of it. And it's very low profile. The stainless steel bezel, which is hardened steel, allows the boxed top hat crystal to project above it. Brushed satin finishing to the top of the head of the piece is flawless, beautiful luster to it, and that complements the contrasting mirror polishing to the flanks. They've made the correct decision by using holes in the lugs, and as you can see, the holes mean that you can change the bracelet and exchange it for a strap. Using a spring bar tool, you just push the spring bar tool in from the outside. You don't need quick release spring bars. Female pivoted end links articulate very smoothly, and they give a perfect fit to the 38.5mm head of the piece. And they made the correct decision by using female pivoted end links rather than using male end links, which would make the lug to lug longer. Beautiful luster to the hardened steel, as you can see. Absolutely gorgeous finishing to it. The brushed satin finishing is beautiful, and the mirror polishing to the flanks is flawless. Screw pins, which is good, nice heavy gauge to the links, and I'm pleased to see screw pins rather than use push pins, which would have been a cost-cutting measure. Bracelet articulates smoothly, no stiff links, and it doesn't rattle. Good tight tolerances between the screw pins and the links. They've made the correct decision by using an oyster style bracelet, and 20 to 16 is the perfect taper. So I'll give you a wrist shot and you can see how it fits on my 8-inch wrist. Now, I haven't sized the bracelet, and as you can see, there's easily enough links. This will fit up to a 9-inch wrist, and this is with the clasp on its minimum extension. It can actually be extended by 10mm. So plenty of links for a larger wrist, and as I've detailed, 20 to 16 is perfection personified. That is the perfect taper for a 38.5mm. The bracelet feels very well balanced. The clasp is the correct proportion. It's heavy gauge, but it doesn't feel too bulky, too thick or too wide. They've got the proportions right, no sharp edges, no sharp corners, doesn't dig into the wrist. And the clasp and bracelet perfectly balance the head of the piece. This is one of the most comfortable watches I have worn on my channel. It actually feels weightless at 140 grams. Now bear in mind, if you have a 6 to 7-inch wrist, you're going to be removing 4 or 5 links and reduce it from 140 down to circa 130 grams. Even with an 8-inch wrist, I would remove 2 links from this bracelet. So it's going to be well below 140 grams, circa 135. It feels very well balanced. The head of the piece, the bracelet and the clasp feel perfectly balanced. It doesn't feel top heavy or too tall on the wrist, and that is due to it being only 11.3mm, even with the boxed top hat style crystal. And it just looks absolutely gorgeous. It looks like a vintage 1960s piece with the 2 crowns and the inner rotated bezel. And I love the concave profile to it. It has a real 3D effect to the bezel, a nice depth to the dial, and that inner rotating bezel is just beautiful to look at. Perfect asymmetrical dial. They've made the correct decision by using the Miyota caliber 9039 because it doesn't have a date complication, and the lack of the date window isn't a negative because we've got the perfect symmetry of the dial. The legibility is outstanding, and I love the shape of the hands. The hands are made from solid blocks of brass, which is then diamond cut. And then what they do is they paint the hands white and then they infill them with BGW9, as you can see. And the shape of the hands are clearly legible both in daylight conditions because they're white and also they're well proportioned. So great looking piece, and I really like the fact it's only 11.3. This will easily slip underneath a shirt cuff if you wear business shirts, so it's an ideal daily wear piece. It's not top heavy and tall, like 13 millimeters. 11.3 is incredible. Just look at the gap. It has a minimal gap underneath the undercut of the case between the tips of the lugs and the wrist. And I love that curved undercut to the case and the flat case back. It really does have a very snug fit. Just absolutely gorgeous, very comfortable, feels weightless on the wrist. It really does feel like an invisible watch. Right, so let's do a lume test and we'll see how the lume performs when it's charged up to the absolute maximum. So as always, I'm going to use my 100 LED torch to charge it up to its absolute peak. Now I've got high expectations of this V3 because they have upgraded the layers of BGW9. On the V1 and V2, they wanted to increase the performance. So they've now applied 0.3 millimeters of BGW9. That is a full 6 layers on the printed indices. That's the maximum you can possibly do, without using applied indices, of course, which can be infilled even deeper. Right, so that's now fully charged. And as you can see, this is stellar performance. This has not disappointed. This is absolutely incredible BGW9 performance. It's some of the best I have seen on my channel, and I have reviewed hundreds of watches. Just look at the printed indices. This is 0.3 millimeters thick of printed BGW9. 6 full layers. You cannot improve upon this. And Traska deserve credit because this V3 clearly has better performance than the V1 and the V2. It really needed the indices to be made printed thicker, and as you can see, it's incredible. Perfect colour tone match between the hands and also the printed indices, and even the inner rotating bezel has BGW9 on it, so one can clearly see the bezel and the dots at the 60-minute marker. And I absolutely love the colour tone of the BGW9. This is glowing so brightly that the BGW9 is actually whitish. It's glowing whiter than normal BGW9, which is, I would say, a darker blue. And colour tone match is perfect. Often it's the case that when you apply more layers of BGW9 to the indices, there's a slight colour tone mismatch between the hands and the indices, because the more layers you apply, the brighter it glows. And of course it appears whiter rather than blue. But if you look at the handsets and you look at the indices, they've got the colour tone match. So they've clearly upgraded the amount of lume they're using on the hands and also the printed indices. 0.3 millimeters is a very thick application on a printed dial. Perfect symmetry to it, and I think they've made the correct decision by not having a date complication at 3 o'clock or 6, because we've retained the asymmetrical dial and it's very legible. One can clearly read the time in the dark, as you can see. The proportions of the hands are correct. The length of the hands and also the size, they allow for a large plot, a large area of BGW9 to be applied. It's not fading whatsoever. It will continue to glow like this for hours. And that's the benefit of using 0.3 millimeters of printed BGW9 on the dial. Exceptional performance. It's 10 out of 10. Right, so let's discuss the movement used, because it's one of my favourite aspects of the piece. So, as I've detailed, this uses the Miyota Caliber 9039, which is made in Japan. It's my personal favourite Miyota Caliber. So the architecture of the 9039 is the same as the 9015, which is another personal favourite. 9000 series Miyota calibers are premium. They are the very best of Miyota. So it's equal in quality to a Sellita SW200-1 or an ETA 2824-2. That is the level of quality. So why is the 9039 superior to the 9015? Well, the 9039 has the same architecture, but it's thinner. It's a very thin movement. Now, the main difference between the two calibers is it has a low stack height. And what that means is on the cannon pinion, the hands can be stacked lower. The hour, minute and second hand on the cannon pinion in the centre of the dial have a low stack height. So it's a lower profile movement. That means the crystal can be closer to the dial and you can use a thinner rehort or chapter ring around the edge of the dial. So it basically means that the crystal can sit lower to the cannon pinion and there are no clearance issues. With the 9015, it has a taller cannon pinion. The hand stack height is higher, and therefore you have to use a double dome sapphire crystal in order to clear the hands. Otherwise, there's clearance issues with the minute and second hand. They can rub against the underside of the AR coating on the sapphire crystal. So very thin movements and very low profile due to the low stack height. It has 24 joules, it runs at 28,800 vibrations per hour and a frequency of 4 Hz, and this is something I really like about it. The 4 Hz frequency, if you look closely at the second hand, you can see the characteristic 4 Hz sweep of 28,800 vibrations per hour. With the Seiko NH35A, for example, that runs at 21,600 vibrations per hour and a 3 Hz frequency. The thing I dislike about 3 Hz frequency is the second-hand stutters or judders around the dial. With a 4 Hz caliber, it's smoother. As you can see, this one is sweeping very smoothly, like the SW200-1 and like the ETA 2824-2. And that's what I like about Miyota 9000 series calibers, such as this 9039. They are at 4 Hz rather than the 3 Hz used by Seiko on the NH35A. So it's a higher grade of movement and it has a smoother sweep. 42-hour power reserve is good, and also it has hand winding and hacking, which is used for complications. The stated accuracy is -10 to +30 seconds per day, so a rather wide accuracy range as stated by Miyota. But in reality, the 9039 can often be regulated to much better than -10 to +30 seconds per day. This 9039 is running at +2 seconds per day consistently in 5 positions when fully wound to its 42-hour power reserve. That is chronometer grade accuracy. And it's nothing unusual for a 9000 series such as the 9015 or the 9039 to run at chronometer grade accuracy. It's actually often more accurate than an SW200-1 or an ETA 2824-2. It's a very accurate movement. It's reliable, it's well proven, it's been in use since 2018. So at this stage in 2024, it has 6 years of service, no reliability issues whatsoever. And as I've demonstrated, it's an absolute pleasure to manually wind it. The hacking works well, no backplay in the gearing. It feels light resistance, no friction, but very smooth to set the time and also to manually wind. So no negatives to it. It's reliable, it's a well-proven workhorse caliber and a premium grade of Miyota caliber. So Traska deserve credit because you could say, well, this is a mid-tier piece. It's €641, so they should be using a Swiss movement such as the SW200-1 or the ETA 2824-2. But no, I think they've made the correct decision using the Miyota caliber 9039 because the accuracy is outstanding, the quality is outstanding, and it has that 4 Hz sweep to the second hand, which is very smooth. So they have made the correct choice. I would actually prefer the 9039 to an SW200-1. It has smoother manual winding to it, and I like the light resistance in the gearing. It feels like a nice tight movement with high tolerances to it. So excellent, good movement, and the specification of this piece is loaded. We've got the hardened 1200 Vickers hardness Vickers steel, so it's scratch resistant. 0.3 millimeters of BGW9, outstanding, and we've also got the quick adjust clasp, outstanding. Are there any negatives to this piece? None whatsoever. It's excellent quality and excellent value at €641. I wouldn't change anything about it, so I'm going to highly recommend it to you. I'm going to declare this a champagne watch for lemonade money. I hope you've enjoyed my review of the Traska Seafarer Charcoal Black 5223. Please feel free to post your own comments below the video. Thank you very much.